We go. In this chapter 22, the Alter Rebbe addresses probably the most fundamental theological question, which I probably say about every chapter, which is how does anything exist without absolute awareness of the origin of its existence? Sure, a child may not be thinking about their parents, or like the college student who kind of vaguely knows that they have parents, and somehow those parents pay for everything, and his debit card works, and there's gas in his car, but it's not something that he consciously is thinking about. But if he just gives a tiny bit of thought to it, he's always going to come back and realize that everything comes from something and that he comes from his parents and that his parents are continuously and constantly sustaining his existence financially, at least. And even not, even once the person's an adult, they are still the product of their origin. So, how is it possible that anything can rebel against Hashem? Certainly not in a long term, or make that their whole identity. And so the Alter Rebbe has introduced to us a nuanced understanding, which really we're going to see how this develops, like sort of in a gradual fashion, from less than ideal to really horrible, of a term that is not original. It's in the Torah, and I'm going to be cautious about how I pronounce it, and hopefully that will become clear, and it's part of the significance of it. And we're going to use the word Elokim, and I'm deliberately using the Elokim, which we are familiar with when we refer to Hashem, Acherim. Now, in the second paragraph of the Shema is an example where we say, and you will serve Elokim Acherim and flare up the anger of God. Now, the common interpretation of that is other gods. That is, any faith that is put in any other entity as to having independent authority to impact my life or impact the world, whatever that may be, whether it's literally the Greek sense of worshiping some idealized form of humanity, the mightiest, the fastest, the most beautiful, whatever it may be, or it is the more, quote, scientific sense that the forces of nature have their own independent significance and that they can somehow be appeased or persuaded, like that sense of praying to the god of as the sun or the god of the weather or the god of whatever it may be. So this is the common understanding of Elokim Acherim, and therefore, as we can imagine rather obviously, one cannot serve, when one is prohibited from serving or ascribing authority to other gods, to anything other than Hashem. Based on that, why would we pronounce this with the respectable deferential term of Elohim? Just say it, other gods, or as we might do it in English, we use the lowercase g to indicate that this is not really, that this is not Hashem. And yet, this raises the question, well, if it's not Hashem, so why are we even giving them that phrase? Why are we calling them other gods if there's other gods? As if there's God and there's other gods. The Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Are there other gods? And so the Alter Rebbe is introduced an idea in this chapter that we're not going to read Acherim as other, as in I have one pencil and here's another pencil, but rather the back, which is the root of the word Acher, like something comes in succession, like two comes on the back of one, or three comes after two, that the other is the back of Hashem. And what does that mean, the back of Hashem? So here the Alter Rebbe explains that it is the expression of what Hashem gives to the world in a over-the-shoulder, less than highlighted, non-deliberate form or fashion. A godliness that is expressed to us in a non-direct fashion. In the priestly blessing, we ask Hashem, Ye'er Hashem ponav elecha. God should shine His face upon us. That we want to get it from the face. And as probably, unfortunately, everybody has experienced, somebody gives you something directly, they look you in the eye, they make genuine contact. There's a certain warmth that is developed. Now, sometimes that's manipulative, like the salesman who's trying to sell you something, so they make a false sense of that eye contact. But without that, if it comes in this sort of haphazard, over the back manner, there is a distance between the benefactor and the beneficiary. Well, this is what the Alter Rebbe has introduced to us, that the klipa, that which does not immediately acknowledge its godly force, is receiving its godliness through the backside, through the non-deliberate side, through the non-focused side. It is that sort of shallower sense of gift. Now, the Alter Rebbe says, Kach lamayla. So too, meaning just like we have this example in the human interaction, where one person might give something to another in this non-eye contact manner, so too, lamayla, so too with Hashem, bechinas panim, what is considered the panim, what is considered literally the face. Additionally, the word panim comes from the word, the essence, what is truly your desire. And we use this, and we'll see it developed here, very particularly with the Alter Rebbe. What is it that we are willing to do, and what is it that we truly desire to do? Meaning, what is it that we're willing to participate in? What is it that we even acknowledge its significance and its value? But it's still ultimately something that is only basically tolerated. It's not something that is really, quote, enjoyed or enthusiastic about it. Hu pnimius haratzain, that which is truly the desire of Hashem. We mentioned this before, that when Hashem punishes the original snake, the Nachash, he says, you will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust. And the commentaries ask the question, why is eating dust a punishment? Isn't that a reward? Because an animal spends its day looking for food. And if its food is dust, it will never go hungry. Imagine if a person, a human being, didn't have to eat. Think about all the time, energy, money that we spend on food. You've just eliminated that. That's a blessing, not a curse. And so we explain that the reason why it's considered a curse is because Hashem is saying, here's all your food, here, but don't talk to me. I don't want to hear from you. I've taken care of you. I've done my obligation. I created you, so I have to provide for you. I provided for you, but don't call me. So that's not punim. Yes, he's given it to him, but it hasn't been given with warmth. It hasn't been given with what we call a leiv shalem, a whole heart. It hasn't been given with kindness. It hasn't been a form of connection. So what is the Pnimius HaRatzain? What is that bracha that we say in the Birchas Kohanim? Ye'ar Hashem panav elecha, the Kohen blesses us that God's face should shine upon us. That's what we want. We want God's face to shine upon us. That is the Chafetzai Hamiti, his true desire. A common example that Chassidus uses if a person goes on a trip. So yes, he wants to wake up on time. Yes, he wants, we would say, the taxi to come. Yes, we want to go through TSA. Yes, we want to get on the flight. But those aren't the tachlis. Those are necessary steps. Those are things we have to do. I'm willing to put up with stopping at red lights because I appreciate that if I stop at red lights, the world will be a safer place. But it's not what I want. I would prefer that I don't have to stop at red lights, but everybody else has to stop at red lights. But of course, I can't operate a world that way, so I am willing to stop at red lights. So we have to distinguish between what we're willing to do, what we want to do, and what we are, so to speak, have to put up with. So Hashem's desire is for the Kedusha. Why does Hashem allow for certain creations to exist that don't acknowledge and even overtly deny his existence? Well, that's in the realm of the tolerable, which we'll get to. Asher chavetz Hashem lashbiya chayes l'chol ha'karvei lav mesidud kedusha. What is Hashem's chafetz, this passion, like you may be familiar with the phrase chafetz chayim, the passion for life? That is what he truly wants, not just what he's willing to put up with. What is that? Is to bring life to those who are close to him. That's what I truly want. Like I want to give a gift to my friend, and I'm willing to pay my taxes. Yes, I understand in some vague sense that the world is a better place. I am suspect of the value that I'm getting for what I'm paying for. I don't want the penalty. I don't want the consequence of not doing it. So yes, I'm willing to do it. We can't call it thievery. It's not taken away from me against my will. There is even, just to illustrate this point, in halacha, if somebody forces somebody to sell him something, the term is he holds him up. He hangs him up until he says, sell it to me. If he sells it to him, the sale is a legitimate sale. He doesn't want to sell it to him. He just wants the guy to stop choking him. But that's a reason why. Just like a person may not want to sell something, but he's so financially destitute that he has to sell it. Or he doesn't want to sell it, but he no longer needs it. He wishes that he still could go on his boat, but he's no longer able to go on his boat, or he no longer has the time, or whatever it is. There's all different reasons why people sell things. It's not always joyous and their direct desire. It is often, in fact, a begrudging, but it's still a willingness to sell. We don't want to just be tolerated. We don't want to just be, okay, you can come too. And everybody sort of half rolls their eyes. And you know that you're not really welcome there. So if you're really eager and you need the ride to the airport, even though everybody is sort of half rolling their eyes at your being there, okay, it's so important that you'll take it. But you certainly would much rather that the people willfully and enthusiastically welcome you. That's what it means, bechinas ponim. And that's what Hashem truly wants. So what about those things which deny God, which even are oppositional to God, which are even in conflict with God? Aval hasitra achra, but anything that is, and remember the word sitra achra literally translates as the other side. Other than what? Other than immediately aware of Hashem. Other than immediately aware of Hashem. There are times when we are expected or we are expecting absolute, total, complete, unadulterated focus. So, if you're getting a root canal, you don't want the dentist on the phone, right? Or, in our world today, if people work in factories, they are prohibited from having their phone. The guy's operating heavy machinery. You don't want him checking his text and being distracted. You want absolute, total, and complete focus and fixation. And that's a very difficult thing to provide. So Hashem provides that to what he truly wants. Like people make time for what's important to them. But Sitra Achra, that is anything that is oppositional to Hashem, that is not imminently aware of Hashem. And it's not even easily prompted, like the analogy before of the college student who is not thinking about his parents. But if you say to him, how do you pay for all? Oh, my parents. I mean, it's relatively simple and a quick step for them to become aware of their parents or aware of Hashem and so on. But Sitra Achra is that which is oppositional to Hashem. Not only does it not think about Hashem, it is oppositional. Ba'atuma. And it is Tameh. Tameh means that the godliness is blocked. As we know, the word Tameh, it's often translated as impure. It's a bad, I shouldn't say bad, as in it's not intentionally evil. It's a poor translation because the concept doesn't really exist in a secular language. And it's not just the technicality of, well, now you're prohibited from serving in the temple because you're tameh until you have the red heifer ash or whatever the process is that makes you eligible again. It's the idea that the godliness is not sensitive. The person is not sensing the godliness. The godliness is buried under this tumah. And that's that image of klipa. Remember the word klipa literally means a shell. And a shell squashes it. So if you have a candle, but you put it in this black box, it can't shine. Sure, the candle is still there, but it's squashed. Remember the walnut orange peel analogy. If you didn't know, when I told you there was a food inside this walnut, you can't even imagine it until you smash the klipa. The klipa is completely denying the existence of the essential fruit. He toyevas Hashem. Hashem is disgusted by this. There are a few things that are described as being disgusting to Hashem. And that means that there's no way you can imagine that godliness is there. And so why is it? So how could it exist? This raises the question. This is what we began with. The theological question is, how does it exist? If God doesn't want it, how does it exist? Now, lahavdil, we're not studying other cultures here. The argument is made, right? God can't help it, right? That's the opposition. That's what is loosely called the devil. It is some other force that exists outside of God. That is the standard interpretation. What I say, okay, let me rephrase it. That is a common interpretation, not a Torah interpretation. I shouldn't say standard. That's not a Torah interpretation of Elokim Achem. Other guys, there's some other force. There's some other, and do not have other guys before me. There are other guys, and you can't have them take precedence over me. That God can't help it. That it's some other force, which of course we reject based on the premise that even in this physical world, Einoid Movadoi, there's only Hashem. But according to that understanding now of Tzimtzum, that's of a literal Tzimtzum, which is not the way Chassidus teaches it, which is the whole essence, you would argue that as you come down into this physical world and the godliness is not here literally in this room with me, so then there becomes an opportunity for other forces to sprout forth and be oppositional to God. And, that Purim ideal where you get so drunk you can't distinguish between Mordechai and Haman, and we're like, well, why would that be a virtue? Why would we aspire to that? And our answer is because, you know what? Ultimately, Mordechai and Haman both come from Hashem. Of course, that makes no sense. You have to be drunk. And you can only do that on Purim. You can't live your life that way. We can't live our lives drunk where we have no conscious awareness of the difference between Haman and Mordechai, because that's not living a human life. That's living a life that is outside. So once in a while, you got to touch it. You got to close your eyes and say, Hashem Echad. Good days, bad days, up, down days. It's all Hashem Echad. Those are occasional times that we have to suspend our intellect. In the sort of facts on the ground, in the tangible, in the daily, those are the things that Hashem despises. If so, what are they doing here? I got an idea for you, Hashem. Don't create them. Don't allow them to exist. You won't have to be bothered by them. Why are you creating things that you don't like? Hashem does not give them their existence directly through the face, through the intentional, through the desired, through the passionate. That's not the way it comes from Hashem. It doesn't come that way. How then does it come? I'm sorry. God forbid to say it. So God doesn't want it. So how could it be here? Meaning if God doesn't want Haman or whatever, fill in the evil, or even something far less subtle, if God doesn't want anything that doesn't acknowledge his existence, why does he create it? So again, the argument of literal tzimtzum would say, well, right, God doesn't. He pulls back, he opens up, and things come what they may, just like you send your kid off to school, and they learn other bad things from other bad kids. You taught them to be kind and polite, right? Because every kid, when the teacher calls them in, the parent says, we didn't tell our child to do it. It must be somebody here in the school who taught the kid to bite, yell, scream, lie, cheat, and so on. So it's not us. We went out of the house. He learned this bad behavior somewhere else. Well, if we understand, which we don't, that tzimtzum is literal, right? You get the same dynamic. But since we know that tzimtzum is not literal, that Hashem is the same Hashem in this physical room, just like he's the same Hashem in Shemayim. So based on that, how come there comes into existence matters that deny Hashem and even are oppositional? Not only they're not thinking about it, they are actively combative. How does that even come about? So here the Alter Rebbe says, Ki'im command shoda basa kasboy l'seinai shalei b'retzeinai. This creation is this thrown over the shoulder, this non-deliberate, this non-aware level. So before we get into the why does Hashem create such a thing, which is the sort of overarching theological question, let's just understand the dynamics of how it becomes created. Why it's created is one important question, which we're going to address. Why would Hashem create something that opposes him? Since Hashem wants to be close, why does he create something that is oppositional? No parent says, I want to have kids so they can grow up and be rebellious teenagers and reject everything I ever taught them, right? So you say, well, it's not within your control, but that's a limit on us. It's not a limit on Hashem, right? It's like everybody says, well, my children rebelled. Really? How? Well, now they say I don't daven enough, I'm not kind enough, I'm not thoughtful enough, whatever it is. Nobody raises children to deny their very existence, to not even acknowledge who they are. So we can't control it. Why does Hashem, who can control it, do so? So that's the why. First, let's go through the how, then that will help us to understand the why. How, in fact, does something come into existence from Hashem and yet deny Hashem's existence? So we have basically laid out for us that there are three stages. And again, this is what Hasidus does. It's never going to be absolutely perfect because when you're trying to quantify an infinite God, you're not going to get everything lined up into nice, neat little perfect packages because God is infinite. And so it's going to hemorrhage and spill all about from the alignment. So you have chafetz, the ultimate desire that Hashem wants. Or back in the analogy of the person going on the trip, you have the ultimate objective that he hopes to achieve. If it's a business trip, he hopes to make the sale, but that's not even the ultimate. The ultimate is he hopes to get the money. That's not even the ultimate. What's the ultimate? That he can have parnasa for his family. He can buy food for Shabbos. That's the ultimate. And he knows what the ultimate is. The ultimate is not the thrill of the moment. The ultimate is what it is that he is pursuing. Along the way, there are necessities to get to that goal. This can also be referred to as the panim, as the pnimius, but again, only relevant to the tolerated. So yes, he wants to get up on time, and yes, he wants to make his flight, and yes, he wants to meet his customer, and yes, he wants to satisfy his customer's needs. And he wants to create a relationship, and he wants to have a nice experience. He doesn't want it to be a harsh, nasty, combative experience. But those are desired, again, as they contribute to the goal. And then you have the nuisances along the way, whether it's finding a place to park or going through TSA or sitting in the middle seat or waiting impatiently, whatever it is, you're willing to do it. You don't want those things, and you'd love to find ways to cut them out, which is what improvements do along the way. We try to cut out the parts that we don't want to be bothered with. So whatever those steps are along the way, they're not desired, they're tolerated. But what is the purpose? Why does Hashem create things that he has to tolerate? We understand that we are imperfect, and so we have to tolerate things. But why does Hashem have to tolerate things? So here the Alter Rebbe addresses this. What then is the purpose? Rak, it's only for one purpose. Kidei, lahanish es harashoyim, to penalize the wicked, v'litein schar toiv litzadikim, and to grant benefit or consequence, good consequence or good reward, as it's often translated, to the righteous, the kafin l'sitra achra, when they resist this sitra achra, v'zeh nikra bechinas acharayim daratzon ha'elyon baruch hu. This is called the backside. Remember that term back means not directly desired. I use the word tolerated. It's tolerated. It comes from the back. I have to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. And it would be to my preference if I didn't have to deal with it. But I don't have that option. I have to deal with it. Ipso facto, I'm going to deal with it. So the Alter Rebbe here says that the whole purpose is to, and look what he puts first, he says to punish the wicked and to give reward to the righteous. Now you may recognize this because it's similar to a Mishnah. We actually referenced it earlier in this chapter. In Pirkei Avos, the first Mishnah of chapter 5 says that the world was created with 10 statements. God said, let there be. And you may recognize this because we started off pointing out there's only 9 of those actually in the Chumash, and the idea of Bereshis, the concept of communication, is considered statement number 1. But in this context, we're using it for a different analogy. So the Mishnah says that God created the world through 10 statements. And then the Mishnah asks, but couldn't Hashem have created the whole world in one statement? Just say, boom, just say, let there be a whole world. Excuse me. Pardon me. Why does Hashem have to take 10 statements? So the Mishnah says the purpose is, same phrase we say here, to exact punishment from the wicked who destroy the world that God created through 10 statements, and to grant reward to the righteous who sustain the world with 10 statements. So we ask the question, well, this doesn't seem very nice. Hashem is deliberately putting more specific effort into the creation of the world. Why? So that when a person messes up, we're really going to punish him. We're really going to get him. I mean, that seems kind of mean-spirited. Now you say, well, that's also what grants reward to the righteous. But why put that second? Why didn't you put that first? At least start off with something nice. So we explain over there, and it's relevant here as well, that the goal of the quote punishment is not just the punishment for its own sake. The goal is to extract the good, meaning what is the role of the punishment? There is a punitive and then there is a reparative. And we take it as a truism that Torah's forms of punishments are reparative. Now, again, hopefully every parent tries to do this as well. So the kid hits his sister, so we say sorry, you're sorry. Okay, it's pretty meaningless. It's just a conditioning. So we hope to give them some form of repair. So you did something harsh or cruel. We want to teach you to be kind. Now, this again is predicated only on, or only works, so to speak, if we go with the presumption, or the not presumption is the wrong word, but the premise, that's the word I'm looking for, of non-literal tzimtzum. Why? If I say that tzimtzum is literal, so again, hopefully everybody's familiar with this phrase, right? That God sort of pulled back. Somebody raised their hand. I can't see who. No? I don't know. The hand went up. Nope. That's no. Okay. I don't know. Just unmute and jump right in there. If we take the position that in order for God to create this physical world, he had to pull back and create an empty space where godliness is not, and that God is supervising from above. So what's in the essence of that pork sandwich? Nothing. It's just bad, bad, bad. And the only way that you can do anything positive with it is to avoid it. So what happens if a person doesn't avoid it? Well, he's going to get in trouble so that he'll avoid it next time. We'll teach him a lesson so he'll avoid it next time. And again, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but there's a value to that, right? When a person sees that if they don't put their toys back, they can't find them the next time, you say, you know what, next time you found it, now you had to spend a half an hour looking for your toy, so you only have half an hour to play with it. Now, when you're finished playing, if you put it back next time, okay, so that's an instructive. But I have still suffered that half hour of frustration. When we understand Simsum Shaloi Kipshutai, that God has not pulled away from this world. It just appears that way. So what's in the essence of that Avera is Hashem himself. Hashem is there. But if I just, as we would call it, get away with it, I'm never going to define the godliness there. Because the fun of getting away with the misbehavior is going to negate the pursuit of the godliness in that behavior. How can I find the godliness? Well, that's through this, and we use the word, this penalty. The goal of the penalty is not just to teach me that next time I shouldn't do it because it was such an unpleasant experience. There's a value to that. I'm not negating that. It is that I find the actual godliness there, or to use the Talmudic phrase, that deliberate sins become mitzvahs. Not just because, well, now I'll never do that again. So now the one time I did the bad thing has set me off on a path of virtue for the rest of my life. There's a value there too. That's a value. Here the point is I reach back into the past and I discover the godliness because what I was encountering was only the acharayim. It was only the shallow aspect of it. It's like a person goes to a great palace and a museum and art and he says, well, nice doorknob. Meaning it's not wrong, but he's only sensitized to something so shallow because he doesn't understand the beauty of the art and the architecture and all of the other character traits. He doesn't have any sensitivity to that. So why does the person do the Avera? Because the only thing he has a sensitivity to is, this is fun. This is fun. Imagine, though, if he could find that godliness there. So ironically, again, not that we're recommending it, this becomes the back door to which he becomes aligned with the infinity of Hashem. Because his only entry point is the shallow. His only entry point is the transient. His only entry point is the indulgent. And now he's able to find the Kedusha as a result. Why? Because Hashem gave him some path. That's the only path he would find. That's the value of lahanish asar rishoyim. Again, the translation is to punish. And it doesn't sound so nice, right? And it doesn't sound so valuable. Why did Hashem create this? Just to set you up to fail, you know? You don't want me to eat pork? Don't create pork. You don't want me to steal? Don't create stealing. But that person, that's his only entry point in. What then is the value to the righteous person? The value of the righteous person is that he can avoid it. Now here we get into this characteristic called Midas HaNetzach. Remember from the Spherois, hopefully this terminology strikes you somewhat familiar, that the derivative of the characteristic of limitlessness, what we often refer to as kindness, the Hebrew is chesed, but kindness is a moral term. And remember, the spheroids are tools. They don't have a morality. It all depends what you do with them. A derivative is stamina, durability, stick-to-itness. The word netzach, which we commonly translate as victory, means I overcome my challenges. And there is a certain character that is developed only through overcoming challenges. That is a way in which Hashem has created the world. So were Hashem not to create pork, were Hashem not to create taiva, were Hashem not to create anything that denies godliness, our affirmation of godliness would be deficient. It would be lacking this character trait of stick-to-itness, nose to the grindstone, determination, stamina, all of those good terms. Like we say, when Mashiach will come, we'll long for the days of Gullus when we had that capacity to overcome the challenges. We're like, oh yeah, I double dare you. Let's find out. But that's that idea that we overcome that difficulty, that characteristic. So that is what is developed. That's why there's a benefit to this. Because the Rasha, ironically, that becomes his access point to godliness. And for the tzaddik, it becomes his method for overcoming and thus nurturing, developing, something like that, his midas hanetzach, his character of stamina and determination and stick-to-itness. V'hine, rotzen elyon b'chinas panim, himakar achayim hamachayas kol oilamos. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to now walk us down a path that's a little more scary than we might have thought. Up until this point, we have been using the phrase Elokim Acherim. And we ask the question, why are we using the deferential? We're talking about other gods, idolatry. Why not just use the more literal reading, other gods, like we would in English, say with a lowercase g? Why are we using the deferential? So we've explained, because what we've been talking about up until this point is from Hashem. It's just the shallow aspect of Hashem. It's true that the peasant's appreciation of the doorknob on the palace is valuable, but it's almost I don't want to say insulting, but I guess the word is insulting, because you're missing that's it. You know, it's like my mother's the greatest peanut butter and jelly sandwich maker. I mean, it's not untrue, but it's a little shallow and therefore even mildly insulting. You know, it's like, you're not as stupid as I thought you were. It's true. I mean, it's a compliment, but it's not really much of a compliment. So by seizing on the acherim, the backside, we are still touching on Hashem, but it's like pretty shallow. Like, that's it? That's what you went for? Just to quickly share an experience. When I was in the yeshiva in England, so there was, as many communities, there's the Chabad community, and then there's the sort of Litvish community, and every once in a while you have some people who, to their credit, they're able to sort of bring them together. So we were at such a wedding, and there was a nice mixture of the different communities, and, you know, as sometimes happens, probably more male than female, there's a little bit of territorial. So they had the rabbi get up and speak. And he talked about how he went to New York. And he says, when I went to New York, where did I have to go? So all the Lubavitchers are thinking, oh, you went to 770. And he's like, Shmukel Bernstein's, you know, this kosher restaurant. It's like, that's it? You went that's, you know, it's like I went to Israel and I went right to the best falafel. Like, you went to Eretz Yisrael, that's what you went to, falafel? Well, what's wrong with falafel? Everyone loves falafel. Falafel's part of Israel. Right, but you got the Koisel, you got the Marsa Machpelah, you have the holiest sites, but I made sure to have, falafel. It's not bad, and it's not part of the experience. But that's it. That's what you seized on. It's like insulting. It's like idolatrous in that sense. But it's still of the culture. However, here is really where the scary part comes. From that, it can quickly deteriorate to mamish avodah zarah, to mamish Elohim acherim, other gods, lowercase g. And this is where we're going to see this gradation manifest itself. And that's, again, the point being, again, always, how can the person who has yet to develop mind, rules, the heart, and the rest of my experience to feel in alignment with the infinity of Hashem? Well, when I recognize that going to all the way to Eretz Yisrael just to have falafel is as shallow, and it then leads to idolatry. It goes mamish to a service of other entities, not just the shallow, but I go mamish to Avodah Zarah. So the Alter Rebbe resets the table here. So this is where the Chitas for the 10th of Shvat begins with the period. V'hine, Ratzon Elyon, what is God's true desire? That is called Bechinas Ponim. That's where his face is. That's what he's focused on. That's what he wants. Meaning, the guy on the business trip, if he finds out that the customer already bought the product, he doesn't have to get on the plane and take the taxi. He's done. He's only doing that. They only are valuable as they serve the result. And if he doesn't need them, he discards them. Not because they're bad, because they're unnecessary. That's Bechinas Ponim. That is Makar HaChayim. That's the essence of Hashem revealed through this world. That is the source of life. HaMachaya Es Olamos. That gives life to all of the world. And that will never rest on the Sitra Achra. You'll never find the essence of Hashem on anything other than Torah and mitzvahs. You can't make up your own way of doing it. This is what I like. This is what's meaningful to me. I'm here to serve Hashem. So if it's your birthday and I want to make you something for your birthday, I make it what you want, not what I want. This is what I want. I bought you what I want or what I want you to want. It's borderline insulting. It's certainly not pleasant. So here, this is what Hashem truly wants. This is where his chafetz is. This is to use the Kabbalistic terminology, the soivev. This is what encompasses everything that Hashem creates, and the very particular that Hashem then goes about creating very deliberately, and that's the key, that's a good word there, deliberately, for the fulfillment of his ultimate goal. ולפי שאין אשר כלל סטרח, וגם בחירס האחריים שרת העליון אינו מלובש בסך הממש, אלא מקף עליה ממעלה, לכך היא מקום המצווה הטומאה, השם ישמרנו. So anything that is Sitra Achra, anything that does not immediately acknowledge the infinity of Hashem, or as we might say, is not contributory to the ultimate goal, anything that is not contributory is immediately oppositional. You're getting in the way. I'm trying to go here, and you are in the way. And again, sometimes we forget how many nuisances we have to tolerate. I've told you the story where a friend asked me years ago, why should I want Mashiach? You know, I want Mashiach for sick people and poor people, but why should I? And I thought it was an excellent and really honest question. And I asked around and somebody, he says, we didn't even realize how much energy we spend on the negative. Why do I have to, lock the door and triple password protect everything? Imagine if we could direct all of those resources to good, beat swords into plowshares. So all of these things, all of these nuisances that are constantly calling for my attention, that are not aware of Hashem, they're aware of themselves, they're thinking about themselves, all of these things are the place where death comes. Now that seems like, well, that's kind of harsh. What does that mean? That's where death comes, because there's no connection between the infinite Hashem. Yes, Hashem is there, but it's so disconnected, meaning death is part of life, but it's not part of Hashem. Remember, death is not intuitive to godliness, it's intuitive to physical. That's why God said to Adam, when you side with the physical, you expire. Because the physical is marked by deterioration, and the spiritual is marked by the infinite. So anything, and again, you think about all the things that we invest ourselves in, shopping malls, magazines, record stores, the academy, we get pretty surprised. We thought these were forever. They're not forever. They're not bad, they're useful. Mitzrayim, look at the parshas, right? We went to Mitzrayim, they saved us from famine. They loved Yosef. And what happened in one generation? It's gone. Why? Because it's still about self and not about the infinite. So we think it's going to be forever, but we know it can't be forever. It's got its 15 minutes of fame. It is the byproduct. But in the moment, it's really glistens and glimmers, but it doesn't have eternal sustainability. It doesn't even have 15 minutes of sustainability. AOL, 8-track tapes, General Motors, shopping malls, gone. Who would have believed it? Just gone. Record stores, these things ran the world, and then they're just gone, and so on. Department stores, whatever it is. Okay. That's why they are the place of death. Hashem kimat mezer or v'chay shenex makalos asech mechinas acharayim degdusha shalamayel mechinas golos mamas b'seicha golos ashkina kanal. Because the godliness that is there, the godliness that is holding on to them, that they're ignoring it. They're not acknowledging it. It's going away. Again, clearly my bias acknowledged, but the Rebbe's recommendation for the moment of silence, that you should begin the day and think, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What is the purpose? And the idea, of course, we would recommend that God sees and writes down what you do, not because he's trying to catch you doing bad things, because he cares about you, that somebody thinks that you are worth existing, that God himself has gone through the whole process of Tzimtzum just to make sure that you exist and that you're here to serve something greater than self. Just to think about that for a moment will change the whole day. But if not, if I just ignore it, of course it's all going to go away, because you're not going to be 16 for the rest of your life. And so that vibrancy and vitality is going to fizzle. And if it fizzles, it's going to curl up and die. It's just going to go away. Why? Because it's totally begulus. And that's what Golus Hashchina means. So on the one hand, we talk about God as in Golus, and it's very comforting. Even though we were sent out to Babylonia, God came with us, which is nice. We're not by ourselves. On the other hand, it's pretty embarrassing. Look where I schlepped God. And here God went into Golus to try and retrieve us, and we're like, huh? We're ignoring it. Because we don't have this conscious awareness. So the moment of silence is, imagine if every day you set out, then everything you did during the day would be godly aware, even though what you're doing most of the time, most of the day is pretty mostly humdrum, right? Most of what we do most of the time is pretty not all that exciting. But if we have an awareness that this is the infinity of Hashem, if we have an awareness of godliness in it, then it's not just makif, it's not just some abstract concept like, oh yeah, I thought about that and so on, but it has deep meaning to it. We have the idea that who is a chassid, hamischasid im koinoi. The translation meaning he does kindness with his master. Or as it's also read, the Alter Rebbe quotes, that he does kindness with the nest. Meaning, why does the bird leave the nest? Only to bring back to the nest. He's not leaving the nest. He's consciously aware of the nest. He's out there collecting food for the nest. He doesn't actually, yes, geographically he departs from the nest, but he's not leaving the nest. He's constantly aware of the nest. He's constantly there. So same thing. Most of life is not all that godly aware kind of stuff, right? Most of the stuff that we do is pretty humdrum. And yet we are constantly and continuously aware of Hashem. If we have that awareness, we draw out the godliness. We draw it out from Gullus. And therefore, Nikrid is called B'Shem Elohim Acherim. It's called other gods, because now it becomes mamish other gods. So now it has deteriorated from what we talked about in the beginning, which was the shallow aspect of Hashem. And now we've aligned ourselves with something else. Now we've gone away from seeing this as my mother is the best peanut butter and jelly maker, which is a very shallow aspect and very self-serving. Now I mamish wind up serving something else. You're familiar that the Rambam explained, where did the idea of idolatry come from? Adam knew God, Noach knew God. Whose idea was it to serve idols? Even Cain knew God. God reprimands him. He doesn't say, who are you? Where does this come from? And so the origin was something that even seemed to, quote, make sense, which was, well, God is very busy, So God is not going to worry about whether my children are healthy or my crops grow. He probably delegates that to some other entity, just like a king doesn't deal with all of the particulars. He delegates that. God worries about the big things. You may have heard these things. It's common today. God isn't worried. He doesn't worry about me, about my whether I have happiness. He worries about the big things. He worries about the sun, the moon, and the waves, and so on. And so they said, well, I'll go to the sun and I'll say, sun, you're probably in charge of crops growing. Please make sure my crops grow. Yes, of course, I acknowledge that God is the boss, and that God could overrule the sun, but I'm not going to bother God with this, and God's not going to bother with it. He's assigned it to the sun, or he's assigned the moon to control the tides, or whatever it is. And so it starts with that, which is an acherim of Elokim, a backside of God, something perhaps even tolerable for Gentiles. It's not idolatry. But what happens? It quickly deteriorates and becomes serving false gods entirely. Now, I start to think the sun controls this. The sun is in charge. The moon is in charge. It has independent authority. So here the Alter Rebbe is detailing for the person who's struggling, saying, hey, if you're only aware of the shallow aspects of godliness, and you're not aware that Hashem is with you in every moment, at first it's something very seemingly shallow, I guess is the word, the backside, and then it quickly deteriorates to a total rebellion. Now it becomes mamish avodah zarah. We've seen it deteriorate. The spectrum has gone black from shallow, not so good, to mamish in direct violation. Like this degradation of idolatry, it's gone from the other side of God to other gods mamish. He's now totally gone away from Hashem. He's gone mamish to the service of idolatry. That since that backside of the light of Kedusha is so imprisoned, it's so exiled, it's so out of his conscious awareness, it's so marginalized and dismissed to the point that it has no sense of any expression of self, the godliness that's buried within this person. And on the contrary, what happens? It rises up like an eagle, as if he's above it all. He now dismisses the godliness entirely. He's now completely negated it. Loimer, to say, aniva afsiyoid, straight up idolatry. There's only me and nothing else. He's completely gone from the shallow aspect, again, just like the original idolaters weren't denying Hashem and denying Hashem's authority. On the contrary, they thought they were affirming that God's too busy. He doesn't deal with people like me. What's the mistake? That they are superimposing a time limitation on Hashem. That's a human flaw. I don't have time to deal with everything. I don't have the mind space. I can barely remember the few people that I know. I don't have that capacity. I have limited bandwidth. God doesn't have limited bandwidth.
I just had a quick question. This is all like terribly important. I'm not questioning that. But if the Alter Rebbe wrote this for people who are already there, then why would he need to start with things about how you wind up with idolatry? Because these are people who are already like totally on board. They're just not connected.
Okay, excellent question. And so the Alter Rebbe is pointing out to the person. Remember, the person has come to the Alter Rebbe, and they say, "I'm not feeling this passion for God. I'm in compliance. I keep kosher and I daven and I have mezuzahs and I do all those things." So the Alter Rebbe's, remember, his overarching strategy is mind rules the heart. Develop yourself to always think about the infinity of Hashem. Okay, I'm working on that. What do I do in the meantime? And the Alter Rebbe's point is that if we recognize that any time we are not aware of Hashem, it's like I'm sitting there with my best friend and I'm saying, I have nothing to do. And my best friend said, talk to me. Huh? What? I'm ignoring him. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, if you would recognize that at any moment that you're not aware of Hashem, it is essentially a denial of Hashem, this itself will bring you to that sense of awareness of Hashem. And thus, it will keep you aligned
Great, thank
with the infinity of Hashem. Kamaimer, like the Pasuk says, which is actually a mashup of two different psukim, both from Yecheskel, chapter 29. This Alter Rebbe mashes up two psukim, verses 3 and 9. Yoyer li v'ani esisani. It's very much the parsha. This is my river, I made it. Meaning, Paro forgets Yosef. So what do you mean he forget Yosef? I mean, everyone here knows Abraham Lincoln. We all know Roosevelt. We all know whatever, bad presidents, good presidents. It means they were ashamed. They were ashamed. The Egyptians were ashamed that they needed a foreigner, a slave, a kid to bail them out. So they said, they pretend, we didn't need him. They pretend, we did it. We could have taken care of this ourselves. They're embarrassed that this foreigner, they needed him. So they pretend, no, I made this river. It's mine. I made it. I don't need nothing from nobody. I didn't need anybody to teach me. I'm embarrassed. I don't want, Rabbi Shimon will drive 3 hours in a snowstorm to visit a murderer for 20 years. The guy gets out of jail. He doesn't return his phone calls because he's embarrassed. I don't want to be reminded that I needed you. I don't want to be reminded of that. He pretends I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened. He just completely erases it from his mind. The whole thing is so humiliating. He doesn't want to deal with it. That's what happens with Paro. It's a total denial. So the same thing. Anytime a person indulges himself and he doesn't think about Hashem, it's like, my uncle buys me candy. What do you do for me? You live in this house. We forget about it, Or the story that the young fish swims past the old fish. The old fish says, "How's the water?" The young fish says, "What's water?" Meaning we're so unaware. What's water? What are you talking about? So that's this idea. That haughtiness is the equivalent of idolatry. Meaning, this isn't just like that's the worst thing we could say is idolatry. It's literally idolatry because it is the service of self. I don't need nothing from nobody. I don't need Yosef. Again, it seems bizarre. He forgot Yosef. What, are you kidding me? That's when they're humiliated. They don't want to remember Yosef. It's embarrassing to them. I mean, we're living through it now. Pro-Palestinian protesters they called for the death of the Jews as they burned down the Rosenblum dormitory and occupied the Goldstein Library. What happened? Well, this is our thing. We built it. They don't want to. Why don't you? They don't want to acknowledge it. That's the point. What is idolatry? Oh, we would never do. Oh, idolatry. That's crazy. That's went with the Greeks and so. It is the assertion of my own independent existence. This is my river and I made it. That's why a person has to completely avoid it. The Rambam says that in character, generally we want the middle path. Don't be spending money wildly, but don't be so cheap that you wear rags. Don't eat so much that you're a glutton, and don't starve yourself. Don't be so nice that everybody walks all over you, and don't be so stingy that you won't share anything with another person. Generally speaking, he talks about the middle road. Yeah, there are extreme circumstances and behavior corrections and so on. There's only one character trait that the Rambam recommends. You should avoid it entirely, and that's haughtiness. You should avoid it entirely. Don't get near it. Why? What's so bad about it? Why is haughtiness worse than stinginess? Why is it worse than impatience or gluttony? There's all kinds of bad things. We have a long list of bad character traits. And again, the Rambam's recommendation is the middle path. Like I said, don't be stingy and wear rags, and don't be overly indulgent and gold and silver and so on. But why? Because haughtiness means I am. And anything that begins with I am is a pushback against Hashem is. It's a pushback against Hashem. So when we say that haughtiness is idolatry, it's not just because that's like the worst thing we could say it is. It's not like the worst thing. No, we're saying haughtiness is idolatry because it pushes back against the infinity of Hashem. Ki ikar v'sherish avodah zara hu ma shenechshel v'davar fnei atzmai nifra mikdushaso shel makom. What is idolatry? In its essence, it's not worshiping a rock. It's not saying I'm only going to listen to what the strongest, most beautiful, fastest, Greek god is going to tell me. It is to suggest that I am separate from Hashem. That I am separate from Hashem. That's the essence of idolatry. Sometimes a person can show gratitude and it's kind of an insult. Like, thank you. What do you mean? This is our thing. We're partners. No, this is my thing and you did it for me. Like, it's a hard thing for two people to become so aligned and so in such union. But when they can, it's like, I wouldn't thank my right hand. I like to thank my right hand. What's ridiculous? That is me. Well, in a sense, we talk about this with food brachas. When I make a bracha, we're told that if a person eats a food without saying a blessing, it's as if he stole it. So the common understanding is, okay, so that's what I have to pay, just like I have to pay the grocer in order to get the fruit. So too, I have to pay Hashem. What's the cost? A blessing. Well, but who determines the price? The idea is not if I say the blessing, now it's my fruit. The idea is when I say the blessing, I become one with Hashem. I'm not taking it away from him. If I think this is Hashem's fruit, he grew it, and therefore I have to say thank you so I can take it away, now it's my fruit, but now it's mine. But if I understand that it's always Hashem's, so I become one with Hashem when I make a bracha. Now I'm not taking it away from him. Now Hashem and I are one. It's a hard thing. So here he says that idolatry is that not that I deny God, not that I say that God doesn't exist, but I say that I also exist. Even if I say that Hashem is 100 million billion and I'm one, and that's a far way away, but it's still 1, 2, 3, eventually you get there. Kedisa Bigamara, the Karli Lakai, even if I say God is the God of gods, I'm still idolatrous, even though I say he's the top God. And we say, don't serve other gods. There are other gods, you're not allowed to serve them. No. We're acknowledging any other existence other than Hashem. Einoi, there's nothing else, there's only Hashem. I also have an opinion. I'm also a person. Yes, of course, I acknowledge that Beethoven is a greater piano player than I am, but I also play the piano. That is the contest side. As a musician friend told me, if you try to play, meaning compete, with Beethoven, you're going to lose. The goal is to surrender yourself, but it's a hard thing. I don't want to surrender myself because I'm afraid I'm going to get taken advantage of. I'm afraid I'm going to get forgotten. And then again, the same thing with Hashem. So if I surrender myself to Paro, right, Paro turns on you in one generation. If I surrender myself to the university, all of a sudden they're burning down the Goldberg dormitory, screaming death to the Jews. What happened? If I surrender myself to the government, they're also going to stab me in the back. But if I surrender myself to Hashem, that's where trust comes. And again, to this person who says, well, what's the problem? I'm not denying God. Well, in that moment, I am. Because I'm saying, I don't want to be in alignment with Hashem because I'm afraid that I'm going to get hurt. He's going to do something bad to me. Because Hashem is only there where there is total bittul. That's where godliness is. So the guy says, but I'm looking, I want to be close with Hashem. What does that require? I have to be receptive to it. And it's, well, how do I know? I'm totally there. I mean, I just want to keep a little bit on the side for myself. I just want to keep a little bit of protection. I just want to make sure that I'm going to still, right, there's a little bit of non-trusting. That little bit of non-trusting deflates the whole relationship. And that's why even this seemingly slight detachment is called mountains of separation. Because I'm there most of the time. And again, what if I just eat shrimp once a week? What if I just violate Shabbos once a year? Okay, every mitzvah and so on. But in that moment, that's detached. In that moment. Right, tomorrow I'll be kosher and next Shabbos. But in that moment, I'm detached. And I'm sending somewhat of a message that I'm not fully trusting in Hashem. I don't it's not a total alignment with Hashem. I'm your best friend unless a better friend comes along. Meanwhile, no better friends have come along. I'm your best friend. It is a denial of this core essence. What's that core essence? That there is no significance other than Hashem. And anytime I ascribe a significance to something other than Hashem, I'm stepping out of that relationship. I got my nose pressed up against the glass, thinking maybe there's something better out there. Pirkei Avos says that if a person is walking and studying Torah, and they interrupt Torah to admire the beauty of nature, they're liable for death. Well, liable for death? I mean, try some decaf. What's with that? So the Baal Shem Tov explained that the issue there is he thinks the beauty of nature is somehow an interruption of his relationship with Hashem. That the beauty of nature is not part of godliness. That the beauty of nature is somehow something other. So I've detached myself from Hashem. If I detach myself from Hashem, I've detached myself from life. And I've aligned myself with the transient. So it's not because the beauty of it's not the admiration of the beauty. It's the ascription of the beauty to something other than Hashem. That I see it as an interruption from my relationship with Hashem. This idea, again, which is the core of tzimtzum shaloi kipshuto, non-literal tzimtzum, that at every moment Hashem is absolutely fixated upon us. Somebody told me they have a child who's, thank God, getting better, but was going through some difficult time. And at night they had a dream. And what did they dream about? They dreamt that somebody made a deal and gave them $10 million. Very exciting. They thought, oh my God, that's what I'm thinking about? Hashem is thinking about my child who's in the hospital. And I'm thinking about someone's giving me $10 million? Why aren't I thinking about that? Why is Hashem thinking about my child more than I'm thinking about my child? So this idea that Hashem is constantly thinking about it, how do I know? Because I exist. The fact that I exist means that Hashem is consciously and deliberately giving me my existence. And anything I do to step out of that is a violation of it. It's equivalent to idolatry. So would you worship idols? Oh, of course not. Never, never, never. Would I stop thinking about Hashem for a moment? I might. Well, if we understood what that meant, we might maybe modify that as well. Stop here.